What's up? This is Patrick at Radicards.com, and today we're going to be talking about how to avoid getting ripped off, right? So this is kind of an interesting question. I like it. I like to think about these things because, well, I don't like getting ripped off. So let's get right into it here. You know, is getting ripped off a choice? This is the question, right? The answer should be obvious, but, you know, as we talk, we're going to kind of break down a few tips and tricks to help you avoid poor investment decisions. Bottom line here, when you agree to a financial commitment, it is your requirement now. You are now committed to paying that fee, whatever that fee is that you agreed upon with the seller. You absorb all that risk. Whether or not you overpay or underpay or bought a fake, that was on you, not on the seller. The sooner you understand this, the sooner you accept this, the better off you're going to be going forward. Now, I know this is kind of like, you know, some people get frustrated because they think like, oh, I shouldn't have paid that much, I got ripped off. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to protect yourself. You know, in law, we call this caveat emptor. I've brought this up a few times in the past. It's buyer beware, right? So if you're buying and not knowledgeable of what you're buying, that's your problem. It's not the seller's problem. Yes, this hobby is, you know, it can attract some unscrupulous people, but it is up to us to protect ourselves when we're up against significant financial commitments or the possibility there of to pursue such a commitment. So, you know, let's get right into this here. So we're dealing with a seller, right? It's sort of our responsibility to get to know the seller. When you get in and start to talk to somebody about a card that you might like that they have, especially something of significant value, then it's to our advantage to get to know that seller prior to negotiating. A couple questions you might think of or you might utilize when you're in conversations with a seller. Ask them questions such as, how did you acquire this? How long have you had it? Do you collect, and if so, for how long, and what specifically do you collect? What are you looking to do with this? So this helps you gauge response value, right, of what they're saying in reply to those questions. The more you know, the better off you're going to be. Look for honest replies. Look for storytelling. Look for legitimate responses. If you have a legitimate response from a seller, this can lead to authenticity, which can then lead to strengthening buyer-seller trust, which then in turn builds confidence in the negotiation, right? So if I feel confident about the legitimacy of the seller, I'll feel more confident about the interaction with that seller, and that will allow me then to pursue the possibility of some kind of a negotiation with this potential seller. You know, certain examples would lead like this, like if you talk to a seller and you ask them these questions and they say, oh yeah, I've had this for a long time, it's been in my family for a while, used to belong to my dad. He collected when he was younger in the 50s and 60s, and he passed this stuff on to me. He's in the hospital now, wants me to sell this stuff to help pay hospital bills. You know, we hate to get rid of it, but you know, we got to do what we got to do. That's a legitimate response. That's honesty. How long have you had it? You know, yeah, we've had this for 40 some years. It's just been in our collection. We've decided to part with it because we're focusing on another project right now, and we've decided to go ahead and, you know, find another home for this particular item. Again, another honest, legitimate response. Do you collect and if so, how long and what specifically? Oh yeah, you know, I've been collecting Cal Ripken for, you know, a long time. I started PCing him when I was in my early teens. You know, now I'm grown up, I have a career, and I still PC him. He's one of my favorites. I grew up in Baltimore, whatever. They give you a story. They tell you a story about what they collect, how long they've been collecting. This is very important information to know. And then what are you looking to do with this? So this is a question that is, you know, pretty simple. Are they looking to trade it? Are they looking to sell it? Figure out what they're looking to do with it. That's important, because you don't want to start handing over cash or start offering cash, and if you know, before you know whether or not they want to sell it. They might just want to trade it with something you might not want in your collection, which is nice. So really focus on that. Again, look for a legitimate response and look for storytelling. This is really key. Next point. So after you get to know the seller, that's point number one. Point number two is become a category expert and learn to spot fakes. All right. So if you know your niche like a professor knows their field, right? You'd be in a better position to educate the seller on what they're selling. They may or may not need to be educated on what they're selling. They might know exactly what they're selling, but they might not, and they might not know that they may have a fake. And it's, you know, if you know how to spot fakes in some of those high-end pieces, and you have an opportunity to give that knowledge to a seller, you may not buy the item obviously, but you might say, hey, I'm not the buyer for this, and I just want to give you a heads up that here are a couple things to look for with fakes, and I see here that this has, you know, whatever, fill in the blanks, kind of do your service with the community in that capacity. Help the seller out. A couple, you know, high-end pieces that are often counterfeited are you know, 86 Fleer Jordan, 52 Topps Mantle, and 85 Topps Mark McGwire rookie card. These cards have, the market is rampant with fakes of these cards, so really know what you're buying. Granted, the Mark McGwire doesn't have near the marquee value that it once did in, say, 1998 during a home run race, but the Mantle and Jordan still are highly popular cards, and it's up to us to know exactly what we're buying before we hand over cash or make a trade. So know what to look for in terms of how to spot counterfeits with these cards and others like them. When you know how to spot a fake, you can educate the seller. And some of this information, some of these tidbits of, you know, how to spot fakes of particular cards is exceptionally subtle, and it's sometimes even difficult for us, you know, seasoned veterans in the hobby to pinpoint those subtleties. So it's up to us to educate ourselves on how to find those subtleties. And the bottom line, what I'm talking about here is do your homework. You know, do your research. You know, be an investigator, educate yourself, really prepare yourself for serious negotiations when the time comes. And you know what? If you need to phone in a second or third opinion, a close friend, or, you know, somebody you know that's really knowledgeable on something, don't be afraid to do that. You know, sometimes second and third opinions are absolutely critical and necessary for high-end pieces. So it's always helpful to you know, front-load confirmation of authenticity multiple times, especially with high-end pieces, before the negotiation even starts. All right. So also, the third piece of this, we've identified two things: get to know the seller, become a category expert, and learn how to spot fakes. And the third piece of this is identify red flags and don't be afraid to walk away. All right. So if you don't exercise care during the negotiation phase, you can greatly increase risk. All right. So for example, let's say a seller comes to you with a stack of high-end cards that appears to have been well taken care of, well cared for. And you then ask the seller how they got the cards, and they reply with something like, I just found them. Right out of the gate, you can say, you can assume that that's a huge red flag, because anybody who has a stack of high-end cards, you know, in magnets or you know, well cared for cases in some capacity, and they don't know what they have, you can, you know, that's a red flag, and that might imply that they are in fact stolen. So be very careful with those kinds of replies. Be careful how you interact and carry out that conversation after you've identified that. If it seems too good to be true, it might be. It's okay to walk away. You know, it's best to walk away from the potential of a loss than to assume that it's not going to happen to you, right? So, for example, a highly undesirable outcome is if you buy a car from a seller and the day later the police come to your door and they question you and seize the cards that you bought from the seller because they were stolen. That would be terrible, because you're out the cards and the money at this point. So if it sounds fishy, if it sounds like there's a red flag there, just walk away. It's best to avoid this altogether and politely decline any interest in dealing with this kind of seller. Okay, so those are the 3 points: getting to know the seller, become a category expert and learn how to spot fakes, and identify red flags, and don't be afraid to walk away. All right, I hope that this helps you identify trustworthy and authentic sellers and allows you to exercise a degree of scrutiny with how you negotiate going forward. And I hope that you are able to feel more armed with some knowledge for how to protect yourself during high-level negotiations for high-end pieces, or any low-end piece even. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you found this educational, and until next time, Enjoy collecting.
If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.